That first night was quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of stillness that made the crickets sound like sirens. Alex sat in his study, pretending to read while the security app on his phone glowed beside him. Every flicker of light on the camera feed made him glance up, half expecting to see Karen creeping by in the dark. She didn't show, at least, not that night, but her presence lingered like the scent of bad perfume, always there, even when she wasn't. The next morning, a white SUV slowed near his driveway. A man in a Maplebrook HOA polo shirt stepped out, clipboard in hand. He didn't knock. He just walked the perimeter, scribbling something every few seconds. Occasionally snapping photos like Alex's home was part of a criminal investigation. Alex opened the door and leaned casually against the frame. "Morning? You want to explain? Why you're on private property?" The man didn't flinch. "Routine HOA assessment. We're noting violations." "I'm not part of your The man offered a thin smile. "That's up for debate." "Not legally," Alex replied, stepping forward. "I suggest you leave. Now." That afternoon, Alex found an envelope shoved under his front door. It wasn't mailed, just hand-delivered, like some middle school prank. Inside was a fine notice for $250 citing early holiday light fixtures, referring to the string of old Edison bulbs hanging under his back deck, which hadn't even been plugged in. Scribbled in pen at the bottom, "This is your final warning." Alex stared at the note, his jaw tightened. He reached into his filing cabinet and pulled out a fresh manila folder. On the cover, he wrote, "Whitmore, HOA abuse, Maplebrook, -2025. It was time to document everything. That night, under the cover of darkness, he mounted a second camera over the rear fence. He also installed motion-activated lights on the side yard, Karen's favorite shortcut. When the lights snapped on during his installation, he saw the movement. A shadow ducking behind the hedge. "Smile, Karen," he whispered to himself. "You're on camera?" But the real surprise came the following morning. He found scratches along the passenger side of his pickup. Fresh, deep, jagged lines. Unmistakably intentional. The paint had been gouged in an arc, and someone had etched a crude message with a key. "Join or pay." He crouched beside it, running a finger gently along the damage. His eyes narrowed, not with panic, but focus. The kind of look he gave in court right before delivering a knockout blow. Inside, he replayed the night's footage. At 3:27 a.m., a hooded figure crept from the street. Short, stiff posture, walking with a slight limp. A flash of reflection caught the edge of a keychain. Not just any keychain. It was shaped like a tiny gold gavel, Karen's signature charm, the one she showed off every HOA meeting clip he'd found online. She had no idea what she'd just done. Alex closed his laptop with calm, surgical precision. The tension in his jaw was gone now, replaced by a small, satisfied smirk. He wasn't just going to fight back. He was going to dismantle everything she'd built, piece by rotten piece. And the first blow was coming soon. Alex started his day the way he always did when war was on the horizon, with a stiff coffee and a tighter resolve. The video evidence of Karen scratching his car looped on his phone, playing silently as he sat on his porch, watching the sunrise over Maplebrook. Every time he saw the glint of her signature gavel keychain, he smiled just a little more. Fought dirty lawyers, corporate sharks, and one particularly vindictive ex. Karen didn't know it yet, but she had waded into waters far deeper than she could swim. By mid-morning, Alex was inside the county clerk's office. Standing across from a bored-looking official, flipping through property maps, he leaned forward and tapped the plat diagram with one finger. "See that?" he asked. This section was never formally annexed. Maplebrook HOA is operating on assumed territory. The clerk blinked and leaned closer. "Looks like you're right. No stamped approval. That expansion was proposed in 2008 but never finalized, which means they've been collecting dues and enforcing rules on homeowners they have no legal jurisdiction over." The clerk gave a low whistle. That could mean lawsuits. Big ones. Alex gave a polite nod. Not could, will. Back. Home Hit's mailbox contained another violation slip. This time, excessive window glare. During daylight hours, he nearly laughed. Karen was getting desperate. He filed the slip into his growing dossier and opened his laptop. With each click, he compiled a timeline of harassment, timestamps, violation notices, photos, and now most deliciously, the video of her keying his vehicle. He labeled the file, Exhibit A, harassment and vandalism. That evening, he got a surprise visit. Karen. She didn't knock. She strutted up like she owned the sidewalk and stood arms crossed at the edge of his porch, oozing self-importance. "Mr. Harlan," she began with forced civility, "I'd like to offer you one last chance to bring your property into compliance." Alex didn't stand up. He just sipped his drink and stared at her like she was a student who hadn't done her homework. Karen pressed on. "We're filing formal penalties tomorrow. The HOA board has voted. If you don't comply, we'll escalate with legal action." "Oh," he said. "And what court would that be?" "The same one that would be very interested in a certain piece of video evidence involving you and a classic car?" Her face twitched. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Then I'm sure you won't mind if I forward the video to the sheriff's office and file a formal charge for felony vandalism." Karen's confidence faltered for just a second, then flared up. You think you're the first homeowner to challenge us? We've crushed people 10 times your size. We've had code enforcement fine residents into foreclosure. You have no idea how deep this runs. But Alex had already stood up, calm and deliberate, and pulled a small folder from behind the porch pillar. Actually, I do. I've seen your fake annexation paperwork, your forged violation records, and now, your handiwork with my car. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. I'm giving you one chance, he said. One, back off. Or the next time you knock on this porch, you'll be reading a restraining order. She turned, tight-lipped, and stormed off without another word. But even as she vanished down the street, Alex didn't relax, because he knew something she didn't. He'd just provoked a snake, and snakes don't back down, they strike. 2 days passed in silence, but it wasn't the kind that brought peace. It was the coiled tension before the storm, and Alex knew better than to assume the enemy had gone quiet, out of defeat. Karen wasn't retreating, she was plotting it. Began with the lights. He woke at 2:14 a.m. to the staccato burst of every outdoor light flaring at once. His security system blared. The back floodlights flickered, then failed. He rushed to his tablet and opened the camera feeds. All were black. Wires had been slashed out when he stepped outside, barefoot and tense. He found the side fence gate wide open. On the porch lay a brick and beneath it, a folded piece of notebook paper. You want a war? Let's play, lawyer boy. Alex exhaled slowly, his breath curling in the cool air. The game had changed. The next morning, a city inspector showed up at his door with a clipboard and a grim expression. Mr. Harlan, we've received a report of unauthorized structural work in progress. Alex frowned. I haven't started anything. Your neighbor claims you're modifying the porch without permits. That's a citation unless you provide documentation. He showed the inspector around. Nothing had changed, but it didn't matter. The inspector issued a warning anyway. You'll need to appear for a hearing next Friday. By noon, 3 more anonymous complaints had been filed against him. Parking violation, noise complaint, fire hazard. Someone. No. Karen had decided that if she couldn't control him legally, she'd drown him in bureaucracy. Alex returned to his desk, steam rising from the untouched coffee beside him. He flipped open the folder marked H.O. Abuse Maplebrook and began drafting a countersuit. Harassment, defamation, fraudulent code enforcement, but his instincts screamed it wasn't enough. Not yet. He needed leverage, so he dug deeper. The public HOA meeting minutes, buried online in a dusty PDF archive, held a goldmine. One entry in particular stood out, a special vote from 2008 where the board claimed to have approved a boundary expansion. There was no county seal, no signatures, just a typed note. He cross-checked the names on the board. Back then, Karen had been treasurer. Another search unearthed something better. 2 lawsuits from 2012 and 2016 against Maplebrook HOA for overreach and harassment. Both had been quietly settled, no public headlines. But Alex found the court dockets. The HOA had been warned. Twice he printed it all, and then. That evening, the real blow landed. As he stepped outside to bring in the trash bins, he froze. His Mustang, the one he'd already repaired, was sitting low. Too low. All 4 tires had been slashed. Hid in shouts. He didn't curse, he just walked calmly to the porch, took a picture, and emailed it directly to the sheriff's office with the subject line. Second act of felony vandalism suspect, Karen Whitmore. Evidence enclosed. He knew what she wanted. She wanted fear. To make him question his move, regret standing his ground. But all she'd really done was hand him more ammunition. Back inside, he added a new folder to his case prep labeled Criminal Escalation. This time, he didn't just sit behind his laptop, he called a judge, a retired colleague from his circuit days, someone who owed him a favor. I need a restraining order, Alex said, and I'll need it fast. Before she crosses the line, she can't uncross. There was silence on the other end, then a tired sigh. What did they do now? Alex smiled faintly. They picked the wrong man's car. Again, the emergency. Court hearing was set for the very next day, held quietly and without public notice, just the way Judge Walden preferred to handle volatile neighborhood disputes. Alex arrived early, pressed suit, briefcase in hand, every piece of evidence cataloged and printed in duplicate. Karen arrived late, practically bursting through the doors with a lawyer in tow, a sharp-chinned, arrogant man in an overpriced suit who looked more familiar with real estate deeds than restraining orders. She hadn't expected Alex to go this far. That much was clear in the way her eyes darted between him and the stack of folders he laid before the judge. Her smugness cracked, just slightly. Alex didn't need to grandstand. He let the documents speak for themselves. Photographs of the car scratches, the slashed tires, the threatening note, video footage of the first vandalism, and screenshots of the false violations. Then he presented the 2008 HOA boundary map, stamped DRAFT, with no legal authority, and copies of past lawsuits against the HOA board that included Karen's name. Judge Walden studied the stack, then looked over his glasses at Karen. This is the second time in 3 years your HOA has faced complaints of overreach. You personally, Ms. Whitmore, have a documented history of harassing non-member residents. You're operating well outside the scope of your authority. Karen opened her mouth, but her attorney placed a hand on her arm. A silent command. Don't make it worse. Alex leaned back slightly. Calm, controlled. The judge continued. Mr. Harlan, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order. Ms. Whitmore, you are not to set foot on Mr. Harlan's property, nor make direct or indirect contact. Any further violation will be escalated to criminal charges. Are we clear? Karen's face reddened, but she nodded. Her voice, for the first time, faltered. Crystal, outside the courthouse, she didn't speak. Her attorney whisked her away quickly, but not before Alex caught one last glance. Not of fear, but hatred. Cold and precise. The kind of hatred that only quiets long enough to grow teeth. Alex returned home thinking it was finally over. The restraining order would muzzle her, at least for a while. He parked his backup car in the garage, locked the gates, and activated all 5 new security cameras. 2 infrared, and 1 angled directly at the fence Karen had slipped through days earlier. But at midnight, a different kind of warning came. Power went out. The house snapped into blackness with a low electric pop. The emergency backup light flickered on. He checked the breaker box. Nothing had tripped Dot. Then the smell hit him. Burnt copper. He followed it to the utility box near the side yard, where he found the access panel ripped open, the wires inside slashed and scorched. Someone had shorted the entire system. Sabotaged. The motion-activated camera above it was smashed. A hammer, one from his own shed, lay in the grass nearby. Alex took a breath. She was still coming. Even after the court, after the threat of arrest, Karen had decided to play fire with fire. He took out his phone, but paused. No police this time, not yet. Instead, he dialed a different number, a private investigator. Yeah, he said when the gruff voice answered. I need surveillance on someone. Starting tonight. High priority. Dangerous ego might be escalating. He walked back into the house through the dark, only his phone, flashlight, lighting the way. Karen had crossed the line again. And next time, he wouldn't just be filing papers. He'd be turning over evidence that could dismantle her entire world. Alex didn't sleep that night. Not really. He sat in the darkened living room, the hum of backup power running low, watching the glow of his laptop as files uploaded to a secure cloud server, surveillance footage, restraining order documentation, the court hearing audio, and now, a growing collection of reports from the private investigator, a retired cop named Reese Callahan, who didn't just dig deep, he tunneled through people's lives. By noon the next day, Reese had already delivered his first findings. Karen's life, once pristine on the surface, had cracked spiderwebbing beneath the paint. First things first, Reese said, tossing a USB stick on Alex's desk. She's not just HOA president, she owns 3 homes in Maplebrook. She flips them through a shell company, all bought under market value. Alex raised an eyebrow. That's fraud if she's manipulating homeowners into selling cheap under pressure. Exactly, Reese nodded. And the guy she sends in to inspect those homes before they go on sale. He's her cousin, not licensed. Total grifter. Reese wasn't done. And get this, she's been rerouting HOA funds to a landscaping company she technically owns, padding invoices, charging triple for services never rendered. Alex's mind word, embezzlement, wire fraud, racketeering. If it's systemic, you're starting to see the picture. He was. Karen wasn't just a tyrant, she was a full-blown con artist hiding behind a picket fence and now Alex had everything he needed to expose her. That afternoon he sent an anonymous packet to the county attorney's office. Everything Reese had found, carefully indexed, wrapped in a neat legal bow, but he wasn't finished. He sent another. Copy 2 Maplebrook's homeowners minus 73 emails in total. With video evidence, with court documents, with a warning, you are being robbed by the person who claims to protect you. By 4 p.m., the HOA group chat, which Alex had quietly infiltrated under a burner profile, exploded. Is this real? Karen's been finding me for years. I paid for landscaping, she never did. We need an emergency meeting now. The cracks weren't just forming, they were shattering. Karen's control over the neighborhood was dissolving in real time. Alex sat back and watched it burn. But Karen didn't go quietly. That night, a car screeched to a stop in front of his house. The white SUV. Her white SUV. She didn't even bother hiding anymore. She marched up the path, ignoring the restraining order, fury written across her face. Alex met her at the porch with his phone already recording. You think you've won? She hissed. I built this neighborhood. I made these people civilized. No, Alex said coolly. You extorted them, intimidated them. You used fear as currency. You're ruining everything. No, he said, stepping down one stair, camera steady. You did that when you thought you were untouchable. Blue and red lights flashed around the corner. Karen turned as the sheriff's cruiser pulled up to the curb. Her face paled. You sent that video, she whispered. Didn't you? I did. Deputies stepped out. Ms. Whitmore. One called. You're in violation of a court order. Hands where I can see them. She backed up, flailing, trying to spin, to twist the narrative. But it was too late. Every angle was recorded. Every file was logged. Alex didn't gloat. He didn't have to, as Karen was led away in cuffs, flanked by flashing lights and stunned neighbors peeking from behind curtains. He simply turned, walked back inside, and closed the door. But this story wasn't finished, because when you rip the head off a snake like Karen, what you uncover beneath is often worse. Karen's arrest sent shockwaves through Maplebrook. Within 24 hours, the HOA board went radio silent. The website went offline, and by morning the office shutters were closed with a handwritten sign, "Closed until further notice." But Alex knew this wasn't the end, because predators like Karen don't rise alone. They rise because someone lifts them up. He met Reese again over lunch, a diner with cheap coffee and even cheaper blinds. Reese slid a manila folder across the table without a word. Inside, more names, more connections, and one in particular that made Alex's jaw tighten. Cliff Bertram, real estate developer, county zoning committee, and, as of 6 years ago, HOA legal counsel. Reese took a sip of coffee and leaned in. Turns out Karen wasn't the queen, she was just the dog on a leash. Cliff's been buying foreclosed homes from Maplebrook and 3 other neighborhoods, where similar HOAs are mysteriously weaponized. Let me guess, Alex said grimly. After people are fined into financial ruin, the board takes control and sells them cheap. Bingo. Worse. Cliff had influence in the county's zoning board. Several local ordinances that gave HOAs more enforcement power had his fingerprints all over them. He was stacking the game, one neighborhood at a time. And if Karen fell, he wouldn't care. He'd just appoint another puppet. Alex felt the old courtroom fire rise. He hadn't just uncovered a bully, he'd found a machine greased by fear, powered by corruption. He spent the next week building a case that reached beyond Maplebrook. He worked the phones, reaching out to residents in the other neighborhoods asking questions, collecting statements. Reese tapped into old law enforcement buddies to find financial inconsistencies. Meanwhile, more Maplebrook homeowners began to speak up. Some admitted they'd been too afraid to challenge Karen. Others confessed they'd sold their homes under duress to Cliff Bertram's shell companies. One woman, teary-eyed and trembling, showed Alex a violation Karen had issued for a non-regulation wind chime. The fine had snowballed into thousands, and she'd been forced to sell. Alex promised her justice, and for the first time, he meant it, beyond just paperwork. But then the retaliation came. It wasn't Karen this time. It was Cliff, smooth, professional, brutal. That Friday, Alex returned from the courthouse to find a man in a suit standing by his driveway, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. "Mr. Harlan," the man said with rehearsed courtesy, "we're here on behalf of the county to issue a citation. Unregistered legal services offered from a residential property." Alex blinked. "Excuse me, you've been reported for conducting legal business without a commercial zoning permit? It's a violation. You'll need to cease and desist, pending a formal hearing." The officers remained stoic, clearly uncomfortable, clearly just pawns. Alex took the paperwork and watched the man drive off in a car with a personalized plate, CB-1. That was his message. He wasn't hiding anymore. Alex walked inside, heart steady, but mind racing. This wasn't Karen vandalizing his car in the dead of night. This was political, strategic, precise. Cliff wasn't going to threaten him with fists. He was going to try and bury him in red tape. But Alex had no intention of backing down. He called Reese. "We need to go bigger. Federal. You thinking FBI? I'm thinking RICO." Because this wasn't just an HOA story anymore. This was a conspiracy, and Alex was about to tear it apart. Law by law, brick by brick. The moment Alex mentioned RICO to Reese, everything changed. That single word shifted their investigation from a neighborhood dispute to a criminal enterprise case. One that could drag down everyone involved. Karen, the HOA board, the zoning officials, and Cliff Bertram himself. Over the next 3 days, they turned Alex's office into a war room. Whiteboards covered in names, shell companies, deed transfers, and financial trails took over the walls. Reese's contacts fed them intel by the hour. Former residents, once silenced by fear, now sent statements, receipts, and scanned letters. From Karen in the HOA, some of them bordering on blackmail. The story was always the same. Harassment, fines, foreclosure, threats, a sudden, suspicious offer from a realty company. Then silence. Alex compiled it all. And then, he made the call. FBI Public Corruption Division. A calm voice answered. "My name is Alexander Harlan. I'm a licensed attorney with documented evidence of systemic HOA fraud, racketeering, and county-level corruption. It includes multiple counties, coordinated shell companies, and deliberate abuse of municipal power for private real estate gain." There was a pause. "We'll need you to come in." Alex smiled. "I'll bring files." He did more than that. When he met with 2 FBI agents the next morning, he dropped 5 binders and a hard drive on the table, each labeled, indexed, annotated. Cliff might have thought his empire was invisible, but he'd never faced someone who could dissect a case like a surgeon with a scalpel. The agents didn't say much. They didn't need to. Their quiet glances and note-jotting told Alex everything he needed to know. This wasn't the first complaint about Cliff, just the first with teeth. Back in Maplebrook, the community was boiling. The interim HOA board, hastily installed after Karen's arrest, had no answers. Homeowners began demanding audits, refunding of illegal fines, and mass resignations. Several lawsuits were filed within days. One, initiated by a disabled veteran named Mike, cited Karen's harassment over a wheelchair ramp. Alex offered pro bono assistance to every victim. But Cliff wasn't finished. On Tuesday, Alex received a certified letter, notice of intent to sue, filed by Cliff's firm, claiming defamation, interference with business, and harassment. It was a scare tactic. A trap. Alex read it once, chuckled darkly, and dropped it straight into the evidence pile. He just proved retaliation. He told Reese he's digging his own grave. But Cliff was also accelerating. That night, Reese caught a man snooping around Alex's back gate. Dark hoodie, ball cap, gloves, caught on infrared cam. By the time Reese arrived with a flashlight and a 9mm, the guy had bolted, leaving behind a set of lockpicks and a USB drive half jammed into Alex's shed computer. It was getting desperate. Reckless means he's scared, Reese said. Alex nodded. Good, we keep pushing. 2 days later, the dominoes started falling. The FBI issued subpoenas to Cliff's LLC's county zoning records were frozen. 2 junior HOA board members quietly resigned. And Karen, still under house arrest, tried to withdraw $400,000 from a Cayman account that just happened to be linked to a landscaping contract. The DOJ flagged it instantly. Alex watched it all unfold from his porch, sipping tea, feeling the weight of months of battle lifting, but he wasn't celebrating yet. He knew Cliff. He knew the kind of men who built empires out of shadows. They never surrendered. They tried to disappear, or destroy. And if Cliff couldn't control Maplebrook anymore, he might just burn it to the ground. It all came to a head on a rainy Thursday morning. Gray skies hung over Maplebrook like a warning, the kind that creeps into your bones. Alex sat by his window, eyes on the cul-de-sac, sipping his coffee. Wasn't waiting. He was expecting. And right on time, 3 unmarked black SUVs rolled in. The FBI wasn't knocking today. They were kicking in doors. Down the block. Cliff Bertram's townhouse, technically owned under a shell company, was the first to go. A battering ram shattered the front entrance as agents poured in. Neighbors gasped from behind curtains. Children peeked from windows. One agent held a folded warrant in a gloved hand. Another carried a briefcase labeled Financial Crimes Division. They weren't just here for show. 20 minutes later, Cliff was let out in cuffs. Rain misting across. His smug face turned pale. His hands trembled. His combed-back hair drooped in the wet wind. For the first time, the predator looked like prey. Alex watched silently, arms crossed. Reese stood behind him, smiling like a man who'd waited years for this kind of day. Real chaos unfolded in the hours that followed. A storm of headlines hit the internet. FBI raids local developer and HOA racketeering scandal. Dozens of homeowners file class action suit after years of HOA abuse. Karen Whitmore faces new charges. Money laundering, conspiracy, and witness intimidation. Turns out the USB left behind during the failed break-in wasn't a virus. It was a desperate last-ditch plant. An attempt to frame Alex for hacking into HOA databases. But Reese had anticipated it and handed the device over to the Bureau days before. They found metadata tracing its origin straight back to Cliff's legal office. It was over, truly over, but Alex didn't stop at victory. He wanted permanence. He called for a full HOA audit, not just for Maplebrook, but for every community tied to Cliff's network. He personally drafted policy recommendations to the county board, closing legal loopholes that allowed HOS to enforce fines without oversight. A month later, those policies passed. Karen's house went up for sale under government seizure. Her name was stripped from every HOA record, and Cliff, he was denied bail. Multiple wire fraud charges ensured he'd be seeing the inside of a courtroom and, likely, prison. For years to come, Maplebrook transformed. The residents formed a new voluntary neighborhood committee focused on safety and community events. No fines, no surveillance, no current enforcers. Yards grew a little wilder. Laughter returned to the sidewalks, and front porch lights began to glow again after sunset. One Saturday, Alex stood beside Reese at the community center's relaunch barbecue. Didn't think suburban justice would get so, cinematic. Reese chuckled, biting into a hot dog. Alex smiled. I didn't do it for drama. I did it so no one here would be scared to hang a flag or paint their shutters the wrong shade of blue. Reese nodded. Still, if you ever decide to run for mayor, you've already got the story. Alex shook his head. Nah, I'm retiring from neighborhood warfare. But just as he turned, a woman approached nervously. Mr. Harlan, she asked. Sorry to bother, but we just moved into Greenbridge Estates. They've got a new HOA, and they're already fining people for mailbox fonts. Would you mind taking a look at our bylaws? Alex looked at her, then at Reese, then back at the smiling family's scent of grilled food and laughter floating on the breeze. He sighed, then grinned. Get me a copy. Let's hunt another one.